In Leviticus chapter 23, God lays out the biblical feasts or his appointed times for Moses. There are 7. It starts with 4 in the springtime and 3 in the fall. In spring, we start with Passover, then we have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of First Fruits, and then we have the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot, or as we know it, Pentecost. And then when fall comes around, we have the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Well, why is it important to celebrate God's appointed times or to understand them? Well, while God is laying them out for Moses in Leviticus 23, he actually says at least four times, this is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live. Well, if we truly believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then we need to understand that we are a part of those generations to come. We are that generation that came, and we are also to play a part in passing down those same traditions for the generations still to come. We serve a generational God. To understand this more fully, I'm going to share just a really brief snippet of my own testimony. I'm a Gentile, but I am grafted in, and God took me through an amazing journey to show me that he even wanted me to honor his appointed times. Many years ago, I separated from my boyfriend, Joe, and I entered a time of great heartache. But during this desert season of my life, God showed up and he actually gave me a promise saying, Susan, you and Joe will be together. Well, eventually I came to really believe this promise, but yet I was still waiting. During this season, I was invited to attend a Christian retreat. When I got there, the topic was on something I did not expect. For a beautiful Jewish Christian woman was there to speak about God's appointed times and why we, even as Gentile Christians, should still celebrate them. 2 of her reasons were, of course, that they were lasting ordinances that were meant to serve as rehearsals for things to come. Well, again, I knew God wanted me at this retreat, but this was not a topic I was expecting. So I asked him, Lord, what do you want me to learn from this? And he said, Susan, if you honor my appointed times, I will honor yours. Well, believing God for a promise to return my future bridegroom to me, I knew in my heart what God meant. So I set out for a whole year to honor all of God's biblical feasts and other festivals. And let me tell you, God is faithful. For once I went through them all once, the very last one to celebrate on that exact day, God ended up putting my picture on the cover of a magazine. And I knew that was just him showing me his faithfulness to honor my appointed times. But even more important than that, during the same season, Joe ended up asking my father for my hand in marriage. God was faithful to his promise, and my bridegroom came. What I ended up learning from my journey and my testimony is that rehearsing is important to God. It's important because when we rehearse, it's like a step of faith and belief that God is going to be faithful to his promises. The best rehearsal, I love the Feast of Trumpets, because every year when we blow that shofar and that trumpet, it is a good reminder. It is a good rehearsal for that appointed time that lies ahead of all of us when we're going to hear that final shofar, our trumpet blast, when God chooses to honor that appointed time for all of us and to bring back our ultimate bridegroom, Jesus Christ. Why not live in expectation of God's faithfulness? Another example from my life, after Joe and I did get married, we were a little later in life. We really wanted a child, and I didn't know if it was going to happen. But God gave me another promise that I would have a child by my own body. Well, an act that he called me to do of belief, of stepping out in faith or rehearsing for that, was to get a nursery ready. So I didn't completely decorate it as a nursery, but I took this room that I had tons of stuff stored in there, and I chose to clean it out. I chose to clean it out and to make room for this promise of God. Well, we now have a beautiful little girl. God was faithful to that appointed time as well. And God calls us as believers to rehearse or to live in expectation or to take steps of faith, however you want to call it. And honoring God's appointed times of biblical feasts is a part of that. And the reason why we add that from generation to generation is because it creates great testimony. When we step out in faith and believe God during his appointed times, he continues to write great story. That this story, all these stories I've shared with you, but even this one about clearing out this room for my daughter, what a great testimony of God's faithfulness to appointed time in my life that I get to share with her. What value that must make her feel to know how much God wanted her in my life and in that room and present to know him. So it's about from generation to generation. It's about testifying. Honoring God's appointed times is all about testifying in generations. God knows what he's doing. Testifying brings life. That is definitely a lasting ordinance that God desires for all of us. So I hope this has blessed you. Keep coming back because we're going to just keep sharing more about God's appointed times and why they're important.